instance here, welcome again. For people who are joining us newly, you're welcome. The Data2Bots Academy is presenting again the Demystifying the Data Space webinar. So we have been doing this for about 4 weeks now. This is the 4th week, and we're happy to have every one of you here. So let's get right into it. So for those of you who don't know, always have to do this for the new guys joining us. Who is Data2Bots? So Data2Bots is an IT consulting firm that provides data engineering, data science related services to organizations in Europe. So we build data solutions that help organizations, increase profits or make actual data-driven solutions or make data-backed decisions. So we provide services such as analytic engineering, data engineering, machine learning engineering, cloud engineering, just to name a few. And we have seen so much of a need for data professionals, and that's why we created Data2Bots Academy. So the Data2Bots Academy was born out of the passion to bridge the supply and demand gap of data professionals. And Data2Bots, Consulting initiated this academy to build Nigeria's kind of first data talent pipeline for data-specific roles. So we are building a platform. The whole aim of the academy is to assist you into launching a career in spaces such as data engineering, data science, data analytics, by giving you comprehensive industry level standard training, and also opening you to opportunities for job opportunities, and including relocation opportunities upon completion of our training. So in a brief, that's what Data2Bots is, and our child company, Data2Bots Academy. As usual, we'll have our content flow as such, and let's go straight into the introduction. So in today's webinar, I'd like to just say, like previously on our last webinars, for those of you who were not around, we have started speaking about data roles in the data space. We came up first from our initial webinar, which was, why would you want to be a data professional? And we explained greatly, okay, what are all the perks of of being a data professional? Then we went into, what do you require to be a data professional? And this basically is, what are the things you need: the right skills, the right experience, the right mindset in order to be a data professional. Next, we went into the data roles, where we explained some serious, issues about the misconceptions of being a data engineer, or what you require to become a data engineer, the roadmap of data engineering. And now we're going to be talking about the analytics engineer. So our outline is going to be just like this, similar to what we had last week for the data engineer. We want to focus on who really an analytics engineer is in this case, and when did analytics engineering become a thing? Because this analytics engineering is just something that that came up of recent, and we are going to help you actually understand why companies are now hiring analytic engineers. And a very, very interesting one, which is why analytic engineers are not data analysts or data engineers. What are the skill sets, the arsenal of an analytics engineer, and how do I stand out from other analytic engineers? And is analytics engineering the right career for me? So just like some things we had last week, and a little bit of spice it up. So this is actually going to debunk everything you know or don't know about analytics engineering and this specific profession. So again, once again, Mr. Damilola, okay, the lead data consultant at Data2Bots, is going to be speaking about this role, the analytics engineering role. And like I said, for all this content that we're sharing to you, especially for these first 2 roles that we've done, Mr. Damilolo, okay, is in perfect position to dish out any content based on the data space. He has over 10 plus years of data consulting experience, consulting for companies such as Bank of America, Randstad, Phillips, NNIP, CZ. So you're looking at a whole wealth of experience, and you're actually in the right place. And this is going to solve a lot of issues for people who are looking into getting into the data space on some specific rules and do not understand what the industry is actually saying about it. So here we have a certified, guaranteed industry expert. And welcome again, Mr. Dami, for joining us. So I move over to you, and please impact us once more.
Hey, Josh, thank you very much for the introduction. And of course, thank you, the attendees today, for joining. So where do I start from today? Thinking about this role, analytics engineering, it's something that a lot of companies are still trying to define what it is. One of the first companies that came up with the concept analytics engineering is DBT, one of the big players in the field of analytics engineering. So in the couple of series of this webinar, like Joshua rightly said, we first looked at why would you want to become a data professional? These were not really technical stuff, right? We just looked at, on a high level, what it really requires. I mean, not what it requires, but why you would want to have interest in the data space. Next, we looked at what do I require? So we looked at also on a less technical level, what a person requires to be a data professional. We went on to look at one of my favorite roles, the data engineering role. And today we'll be looking at the analytics engineering role. So let's start with the basic definition of what is an analytics engineer. What exactly is this role? So 3 points have been highlighted here. The first one is an analytics engineer applies software engineering best practices to analytics code. What does this really mean? What are software engineering best practices? So, for example, a code should be tested, a code should have unit tests, a code should be version control, code should be written in a structured way. So, you know how a typical software engineer thinks, right? So, an analytics engineer is basically a person that thinks, is a data analyst that thinks like a software engineer, to basically bring it down, but not just think, but apply software engineering best practices to data analysis. The second thing is this person provides clean data sets to end users, modeling data in a way that empowers users to answer their own question. So what happens is that this person builds fit-for-purpose data sets. So data sets that can enable the business users to query the data from a database and use it as it is without doing any kind of transformation on it. So they make data available for immediate consumption. The third thing is this person can be defined as a person who uses SQL. SQL we've discussed in the last couple of series. It's basically a structured queried language that is used to query databases. So what does this person do? It basically uses SQL. He has the power use of SQL to create fresh, accurate, tested, and documented SQL queries that enables data processing and data queries from systems. So without further ado, let's take a high-level look at this role from where it started from. What's the emergence? How did it start? So to really get into that, we need to first understand what has been happening in previous times. So in previous times, what we've had was the traditional data teams. And what is a traditional data team? I will be discussing in the slides coming forward. Then we had a shift in data tooling. That was between 2012 and 2018. Then we had a big data problem. People were excited around this time. Again, I would explain in details. We had a big data problem. in 2016 to 2020, that was the first time we ever came across the O3 Vs becoming a problem. Then in 2020 till date, we had a modern data team, and that was when this role came up. This role came up first in 2020, late 2019, but I would say specifically 2020, when people felt like, no, we need to restructure what is a data team. So first, in 2000, so prior to 2012, we had a traditional data team. A typical data team would have 2 hires, okay? The first hire of any data team before 2012 was a typical data engineer. And a traditional data engineer at this time is not a data engineer as we know it today. It's a data engineer that comes in to first, how can we extract data from OLTP systems? I discussed this again last week. That's like regular transactional databases. This guy would build system that maybe it's a script, maybe it's just what do you call it? A process, a software that is running in batches that pulls data from a kind of transactional database and load this data in a target location, in a storage that it can then be, used by data analysts to answer business questions. But data analysts in this case, what do they normally do? They would basically combine several Excel sheets with the data that's been extracted from transactional database and try to create some report on it and deliver to business stakeholders. So a traditional data team used to have 2 variables. Number one was, if you want to start using data, you would hire a traditional data engineer. And next thing, when you've spent like 3 months or 6 months, this guy has built the baseline, then you bring in a data analyst to start doing dashboarding, combining several data sets that has been created by the data engineer and build dashboard on top of it. So this was what you saw in most companies up until 2012. Now, let's look at 2012 to 2016. What happened? There was a radical shift in tooling. And this was a kind of push strategy. We saw that technology companies began to develop innovations, technology innovations that moved businesses to invest in this tooling. So we had cloud data warehouses for the very first time that basically, distributed cloud data warehouses that came up for the very first time. We had things like Redshift, we had things like BigQuery, we had things like Snowflake. So we started having this kind of things that we never saw before. The second thing we saw was the data pipeline services. Data pipeline that was traditionally built by the traditional data engineers. We now saw that we had clickable drag and drop data pipeline services. We had Stitch, we had Fifth Tran. So we started seeing all these tools in the market. So it was a push that companies, software companies were pushing into the industry, and there was adoption from businesses. So we saw things like this. Then we saw business intelligence tooling also coming up, things like Looker, Chatio, Mode, and things like that. So this was the next thing. So at that point, we were still, trying to understand the new terrain of what is going on in the data space. But with all this new tooling, life became easy. But guess what? In 2016, which was the next cycle to 2020, we had a problem. Okay, one was the problem of everybody using the tool. So these tools were available. So we had business users that knew nothing about softwares and how softwares work. They felt so comfortable. We even had stakeholders that normally would require data from data analysts and data engineers. They started drag and dropping, things in the interfaces. They were feeling very comfortable with this kind of tooling. But guess what? You get into a stakeholder meeting where a report is being given to either shareholders or stakeholders, and all the senior stakeholders will come up with different numbers for the same question. How much was our earning from 2016 to 2017? Simple question. You see that because all of them were now using the tools, they felt they had the power to use the tools, and different numbers were coming from different stakeholders. So this was really a shock. The next thing that happened within this time was the big data problem. So we had a big data problem, the 3 V's, things like the volume of data was growing, the velocity at which data was delivered was insane, and we had several kind of data. So even these tools at some point could not cross the big data line. So these are the 2 things we noticed. And okay, I already mentioned about the downside we have mentioned about the problem, but we then, the industry came together and said, what are we going to do? We need to think of a more structured approach. Okay, a structured approach in 2020 to date is where data teams was modernized. And this is something that is still ongoing. What we've seen is that a lot of companies are now trying to adopt this new structure where we had several roles within the data space, because from the onset, it was only 2 defined roles, a data engineer and a data analyst. As of today, the data space comprises of about 10 data roles. And this is one of the roles, and that, of course, introduced the analytics engineer. Now, as part of the restructuring, again, analytics engineer was introduced, and these guys have one major responsibility. That responsibility is to build data processes that have well-defined, transformed, tested, and documented softwares. In most cases, it's always SQL, that can be reused, that can be reused, that can basically be traced, and also create more value within the entire data value chain. So what happened after this was that companies needed to have a reason of creating an entire structure for data teams. The next topic I would like to discuss on is, why are companies hiring data analytics engineer? One of the first reasons why companies felt this was important is the productivity of the team. So like I mentioned earlier, the structuring was something that came up in 2020 and is still going on. But it all came up because of the several gaps that were noticed within the data value chain. So the first thing is the increased productivity of the data team. So what happens is that a data engineer trying to fill all the gaps, which includes building the data platform, making sure that he or she understands the business requirements, creating fit for purpose data. All of this became a big problem in the entire data value chain. So when data engineers own the data transformation process, a lot of things get lost. What are the kind of things that get lost? Requirement from business has to, I need this particular field, I need the data to be this way. So we needed someone that was really close to the business, and that is the analytics engineer. He became, this role became more close to the business, helping business understand how data should be delivered. And the data engineer then focused more on the high-level management of the platform, delivering the platform, creating custom solutions within the data platform. The next reasons why companies think that analytics engineer is very important is data quality. Okay, data quality has been a big issue, like what I mentioned earlier, where you have people come into a reporting stakeholder meeting, and you have 3-4 people coming with different metrics, and this kind of metrics are always inaccurate. It's possible that only one of them is accurate, or all of them are inaccurate. This was one of the major things that companies also felt the reasons for introducing this role. So this has become a standard in the industry today. Not all companies have adopted this. But what you can see is that if you start googling, you start saying this role, you ask yourself, what does this role mean? What do they do? So it's just something that is really new, and a lot of companies are beginning to hire for it. Next, we're going to be looking at is why an analytics engineer, okay, is not a data analyst and is not a data engineer. This is something that we all need to understand in depth, because you see several roles and you're interested in applying for a job. You just see it's a data analyst, it's an analytics engineer, it's a data engineer. And in your head, you're really thinking, why all of these roles are the same. How do they connect? How do they differ? What am I supposed to say in the interview? So this is really helping you understand what it is. And that's really the highlight of this whole webinar series. We want to demystify the entire data space. We want to give people clear understanding into deciding which career paths to follow and why they should follow that career path. So what are we going to be doing on this? We're going to be discussing on this slide is really what exactly is data engineering again. Oh, no, I take that back. How is data engineering really different from analytics engineering and data analyst? How an analytics engineer is different from data engineer and data analyst, and how a data analyst is different from a data engineer and an analytics engineer. The first thing I would like to mention is the data platform. Okay, I also discussed this in length and breadth last webinar. You can go on our YouTube page and watch what a data engineer does in depth. So it's data platform. So the data platform is the core responsibility of a data engineer. This includes, the example I gave last week was looking at a factory. Okay, so in the factory, you'll be looking at things like, okay, the doors, the roofs, the electricity, the machinery, so the entire data platform. So this guy or gal is responsible for the entire data platform. The data infrastructures, of course, maybe the actual machineries and custom ETL pipeline enablers. That's what I call them. Custom ETL pipeline enablers are within your factory, you have some machineries that are not used for generic purposes. So you have, I give a good example is you have let's say a cashew processing plant. You have your actual cashew processing plant, but also you have some very key machineries that does not do the actual processing, but maybe they just do the selection of the sizes of grade A, grade B, and grade C cashew based on sizes. So these are like custom ETL pipeline enablers. So you have your old data infrastructure, you have a data pipeline, but you also have some custom things that you need to build. Whether, for example, you want to mask personal identifiable data of people in your database. These are like some custom components that enables the entire data pipeline process. So, so these are mainly what data engineers do within the modern data team. An analytics engineer primary responsibility is data delivery. He or she is responsible for delivering clean, fit for purpose, transformed data sets that can be used immediately by business users. So data delivery is the primary responsibility of this guy, of girl. Data reproducibility and data accuracy. For you to be able to reproduce your data sets, of course, you must have applied software engineering best practices to it. You must ensure that things are version controlled, things are well tested, things are documented. There is a CI/CD pipeline in place. So it's not the regular data analyst guy that basically just, they need this data, I'm going to build it and push it in dashboard. No, you have to be thinking like a software engineer and applying those software engineering best practices to data analysis and building data sets. So now we talk about the data analyst. As most of the guys in data space might know, this has been a traditional role and it really hasn't changed. The only thing now is that it has some other element. So data insights, so he or she has the 100% knowledge of the data. Data insight is very key here for a data analyst. The business knowledge, okay? So that's why you start hearing things like business data analyst now. So we already know that a data analyst cannot be a generic role again. It needs to be fit to a business domain. So you start hearing things like business data analyst, because that would start removing the role of the business analyst, I'm sure, in the next 5 years to come. So what's happening is that we have a data analyst who is very close to business now, who has data insight, business knowledge, and he or she is now responsible for building dashboards. And that's why you see that things like BI developers, business analysts, these roles are really on a threat level because a business data analyst is close to business. He or she is already doing things like dashboarding, and as so doing the modern data team, I'm predicting 3 to 5 years time is that you're going to see elimination of things like BI developers and also business analysts, because an analytics engineer has taken a lot of the job of a data analyst, and the data analyst is basically creating a space for his or herself. And the industry is, of course, it's fluid at the moment, but as things are going right now, that is the direction. So data analyst has control of the business, of the data insight, the business knowledge, and also some dashboarding. Next is, in every industry, you can expect that there will be skills and arsenals. Okay, so you must be in control of what skills do I need to know. I just need 5, 6 skills to make me climb up the ladder. Okay, that's what we're doing right here on the slide. As you can see, behind the scene, you see a cannon being launched, and that's like, if you're going to a battle, you must have all your equipment, you must have all your tools, you must have your gears ready to battle. So in this new role, what we have identified is the primary thing is SQL. Somebody's going to ask me right now, but that's a data analyst role. Yeah, because this role is basically picking data engineering and data analyst and is creating its own new space. So SQL is the powerful tool. This person does not necessarily need to know Python. If he or she knows Python on a scale of 0 to 10, I would say 3. That's sufficient, or maximum 4. You really don't know it up to 5. You must be 8 in SQL. There is no doubt. SQL is your powerful tool. The next thing is data warehousing. You must understand the concept of data warehousing. You must understand the data warehousing solutions we have. Like I mentioned earlier, Redshift, Snowflake, BigQuery, and these are really cloud data warehousing solutions, not things like Oracle, or you know what I mean, those old school kind of things. So data modeling, you must have knowledge of data modeling, the concept and the application. So things like star schema, things like data vaults. So these are like data modeling techniques in the industry that is widely used. So you must understand data modeling. You must have good knowledge of CI/CD. You didn't ask me, oh, then I'm becoming an engineer. That's why what has happened, if you really look at the role, is that it took analytics from the analyst and takes the engineer from the data engineer. So it's like combining 2 roles. And that's, so you must understand CI/CD, and that's basically some best practices in developing softwares. And CI/CD basically means continuous integration and continuous development, or continuous delivery. And for guys that are not really just coming into the tech industry, that basically means that as you write a new feature or a new function in your code, you are basically integrating it without stop into the entire software, that's into the baseline software, and you are basically deploying it automatically. So it's an automation process in software delivery. Then we have the version control. Excuse me 1 minute. So the version control is basically helping you to know what changes was made, when it was made. So it just helps you to have history of your entire development life cycle. And then we have the testing. The testing is really about making sure that your code is tested, each component is tested. There is integration testing. Integration testing means all the components within your software process are talking to each other rightly. Then we have documentation. When code is not well documented, it's difficult for new people to onboard. So also data documentation, data dictionaries, and things like this. And finally is the tools. The tools you would really need, like I mentioned, is DBT. DBT is the first system that encapsulates everything a analytics engineer needs. It's the first system. This tool is also relatively new in the market compared to other tools, but it's one of the biggest player in this industry. Then we have cloud data warehousing, like I mentioned, Snowflake, BigQuery, and Redshift. What would I be looking out for next is, how will I stand out from other analytics engineers? I think this is an important thing. In every field, okay, you need to be standing away from the masses. Sometimes I hear people say it's bad blood, it's competition, but competition makes us grow. Okay, so I always advise my engineers and even myself that in every industry you need to look at how do I create 80% of the value. It's just normal. Okay, how do I be among the 20% of the people that create 80% of the value? So what I'm saying here basically is that 20% of the people in this industry. In every industry, you always have a 100% max. But really only 20% of those, again, following the Pareto principle, only 20% of those in the industry are actually the ones standing out. Okay, and this applies to any career, whether it's tech, whether it's data, whether it's cooking, or whatever career it is. Okay, you always need to think, how do I become a person to reckon with, either within my company, either within the society, the industry as a whole? How do I become a thought leader? Okay, so think like a software engineer and use software engineering best practices when creating your ETL workflow. Tell me, how difficult is this? You just need to start thinking that if I am a data analyst and I want to become an analytics engineer, I just need to start thinking like a software engineer. What exactly are best practices in software engineering? How can I apply these practices to the ETL workflow I am creating? Simple, and you've just broken the line. A lot of people that do not come from software engineering background might find this difficult, but the earlier you pick up a body that is a software engineer and as a data analyst and start understanding what it means to apply these principles to your regular data analysis role, the better for you. Someone coming from a really software engineering background, on the other hand, needs to understand data, of course, then needs to understand data from business use cases, from ETL use cases, and not just building softwares. So anybody within those two areas can come into this field. Maybe a data engineer would not want to be an analytics engineer, except maybe he or she has a lot of affinity for business, but that's about it. So, and for those who are just coming into the tech space, I think the entry point into this is really data analysis. Those who have never been in tech, they should really start with data analysis, then gradually move into analytics engineering. So the next slide we would like to talk about is analytics engineer the right career for me? So am I making the right choice? Again, it's going to be one line. Anyone interested in learning SQL and cloud data warehouses can go this route. So people are scared when they've never been in tech. They keep asking, how do I get in here? How do I become this guy earning these figures? How do I start mentoring people? People start asking this question. And you basically have 10 years of experience in other fields. So you are experienced, but you want to get into the tech space. In this particular role, I'd say the first starting point is to ask yourself, am I willing to learn SQL? And am I willing to basically learn cloud data warehouses? If this is no for you, please just delete. If you're thinking of, oh, I'm Java, I am Node.js, whatever, please don't consider this. This is not going to work for you. If you're thinking of PHP, thinking of, you come from whatever background and you are really locked into those things, please do not consider this. If you think you have affinity for learning things like SQL and you want to really interact with, you want to understand data warehouse concepts, you want to understand data modeling, you want to be able to work with cloud data warehouses, I think in 6 months to 1 year, you could really make a lot of impact in your life. So that would be a wrap up for my discussion on this role, analytics engineering. Right now, I would pass it on to Joshua for the Q&A. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dami, for that. Once again, yeah, I'm blown away because that is very beautiful information that you've given us. Analytics engineering is taking the engineer from the data engineering and analytics from data analysis, and you're combining two roles together. That is why it's a new emerging role. It's very fantastic. So right now, guys, we are in the Q&A session. You've heard Dami speak, you've heard Dami dish out his wisdom have any questions, now is the time for you to ask. Ask now, and we will definitely provide you answers in live or in the chat. So please, if you have any questions, go to the Q&A. I'll just give some time for people to type their questions.
Seems we are losing Joshua.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people in the chat showing their appreciation. I am one of them also. Thank you so much, Dami. This was very, very insightful. Yeah, this is actually very, very insightful, and I believe that people have questions. So if you have questions, you know, you can actually just put that in the chat, because I have a question. So let me just ask my question since I'm live already. So then my question is basically this: as an analytics engineer, to what extent do I need to understand concepts such as data marts and data mesh in my data, you know, modeling structure, so that I can create fit for purpose data sets? You know, because you mentioned something about having knowledge of data modeling and data warehousing, and I know through some of my work and research that, you know, data meshes, or no, sorry, data marts are like fit for purpose data sets. So to what knowledge, to what degree do you think I should, you know, dive into that in order to understand and create fit for purpose data sets?
Thanks, Joshua, for that question. Data marts are actually smaller data warehouses, okay, conceptually. And if you are working with data warehouses, which are like the big elephant, and you need to create small chickens out of it, which are your data marts, you should understand what a data mart is, because again, it's just a small data warehouse. Okay, we can call it data mart, but it's really just a small data warehouse. However, that's not the right word for it, because a data warehouse, you know, is the enterprise central data repository. But a data mart is a fit for purpose data set which is extracted from a data mart, from a data warehouse, right? So, an analytics engineer, to answer your question, the extent is very well. You should, because that's basically your delivery. That's what you're delivering. And as you heard from as was introducing what analytics engineer is in the definition, they are basically creating data that helps quick usage, and that is a data mart. You know, so I would say very well.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. So if I was in an enterprise that had a finance department and a sales department, I could gather, you know, data from our enterprise data warehouse and create, you know, fit for purpose, you know, data sets, which are smaller data warehouses that those people can, like the business stakeholders in those teams, can actually go to and get their knowledge.
Yes, and that is also why you see that the data engineer role has been a super role, which it still is, but now, because data is becoming just so much, we cannot manage all of this. Monitoring, security, is getting too much, too much of risk. That's why this role is becoming an epic for those coming into the data space, because the data engineers have gone far. Okay, they've been there for a long time. This role is basically taking some of their workload, because they are really getting choked, and also taking some of the workload of the analyst, because we want things to be reproducible. So one of their primary responsibility is data delivery, and data delivery is your data mart. So to some good extent, you must be very familiar with this.
Wow. Thank you very much for that, Danny. So if anyone has any other questions, because I have asked my own question and that has been answered for me now. If you have any questions, please shoot them in the Q&A, because we would like to just wrap it up at this point and allow time for people to enjoy their weekends and enjoy the day. So if we can move on, let me see a thumbs up in the chat. So if you have no questions and you want us to move on, let me say thumbs up in the chat. If we get 5 thumbs up, then we can move on. Okay, we have a question from Kuti. It says, please, what do you believe are the fundamental soft and hard skills needed as a data analytics professional? Okay, this is one that I can already immediately point you to our webinar topic, which was, what do I require to be a data professional? There we take a high level look at the experience that you need. And in that experience, we now take a lower level in-depth look at the hard skills and the soft skills that you need to actually become a good data professional. And if I remember correctly, one of the soft skills is actual effective communication. So you need effective communication to be a data professional. Any data professional, analytics, DevOps, data engineer, machine learning engineer, you need to be able to communicate your requirements. The business people usually do not understand super technical stuff, so you'd have to break it down. You have to actually dish it out to them in a very, very concise and proficient manner. For the hard skills, I'll actually allow our guru, Dami, to kind of give you, he has already mentioned some of them in the arsenal to become an analytics engineer. But Dami, please, Kuti is asking about the hard skills needed for a data analytics professional.
So I would give it in 2 versions. One is the simple version, and one is the technical version. The simple version in the sense that you need to have data insight. And I also mentioned this because this is not, you're asking for a data analyst, I believe, not an analytics engineer. You need to have data insight. You need to have business knowledge. Those 2 things are I think the most important thing. Again, it's hard skills, but that isn't the technical arsenals that you need, right? So data insight and business knowledge, and that becomes business data insight. So you would, let's give an example, and I'll give a good example, is one of your greatest success skills is that you are in the medical space or you are in the supply chain space. You need to understand that business domain very well. You need to understand the supply chain. For example, you have things like supply, demand, inventories. So you have all these key words that is used in that space, right? Inventory obsolescence. So you need to understand what is inventory obsolescence. So you need to understand something specific to that industry, how data is being measured, the KPIs for data. And it's always about things like inventory obsolescence, time to deliver. So all those kind of logistical KPIs. So you need to understand that. On the more technical stuff, you need to be powerful user of SQL. SQL will take you 40%, 50% into that space. Because SQL is really generic across the data space. People just use it in different flavors. So SQL is really important. And another thing is dashboarding. The data analyst right now is really pulling a lot of things from the BI developers, like I mentioned. So you need to understand at least one good dashboard. For example, maybe it's Tableau, maybe it's Quick View, maybe it's, so there are a lot of BI tools, so BI tooling basically. So one good BI tool, one SQL, you need to understand business data analysis, basically. So if you're in the medical field and you're working on things like health insurance, you need to understand things like what are this? There's some codes, really kind of in the medical terms. So they have all this. You need to understand the data. You need to understand the data to be a successful business data analyst or a data analyst. These are things you really need to understand. So just as a recap, you need to understand the business data in KPIs, so the insights. And on the more hands-on stuff, you need to be able to use SQL and build dashboard. And one dashboard solution is always sufficient to get into the space.
Thank you very much for that, Danny. So yeah, Kuti already shares his appreciation, says thank you. I think that answers his question very, very in-depth. Okay, so we have 1 thumbs up. So we need 4 more thumbs up to move on to the next slide if there are no more questions. If you feel like, okay, there are actually no more questions or you don't have any other questions, yeah, let's give a thumb up signal in the chat and we just move on to the next slide so that everybody can you know, have a very, very nice day. Okay. 1 Q&A. So someone is asking if Power BI is a good dashboard tool. It's a good dashboarding tool.
So what I say, it's good. The answer is yes. But what I say about this kind of tools is that it's really company specific. So Power BI is a very good dashboard tool because a lot of banks use it. And the reason is because banks believe so much in Microsoft solutions because they've been partners with banks for many years. But the thing is that you move to another company and you see another dashboard tool. So, but knowing one is sufficient. Knowing one, you can in 1 month pick up another one, but you must know that one very good. So it is a very good UI tooling. I personally have used it once or twice because I've never really been in the dashboarding space. But it's a very good tool, and I've seen it used across several banks. Yeah. And when I say banks, I mean really, really big banks, as big as Bank of America, and this kind of banks.
So I hope that answers your question. To whoever asked that question, we have a hand raised up in the chat. So if Usman, if your hand is raised up, you could actually just you know, type your question in the chat or in the Q&A session, and yeah, we'll get to you. And you can actually do that now because we have 3 thumbs up and we're waiting for 2 more. So this is democracy, right? So once we have the next 2 thumbs ups, we move to the next thing. Okay. I think, is this a question or like a suggestion on addition, Kuti? Validation and addition, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. We have some big men in our chats. Yeah, this is it. You have to identify your company's KPIs. You know, how do you develop and how can you add value in response to your question? That's very, very fantastic. So okay. I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the Q&A. So thank you, everyone. This was a very good session, interactive, learned a lot about the analytics engineering space. And that is what Data2Bots Academy is trying to do, demystify the data space. So thank you very much for joining. In the chats, representatives of the company would have already posted our LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook handles. Just go give us a follow on all our social media accounts so that you can be in touch. You can actually be up to date with all the information that we are providing. And when specifically any product we have launches into market, then you'll be the first person to know. Also, you can actually go to our website, https /academy.data2bots that it's going to be launching very soon, and just be an early bird in that registration, and you never know actually what perks come with that. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. It's been a pleasure hosting this for you guys and delivering this to you day in, day out. And would say bye for now and see you next time.